What's happening, fight fans? Ryan Thomas here, of course, once again, live on the Thomas Take Sports podcast for my UFC event preview and prediction. This time covering UFC 298. I cannot wait for this card. This is one of the best cards, of course, of the year thus far. It's been a very short year, but this is the one that I've been looking forward to dating back to even last year, October, November, September, dating back to as far as then, wondering when, of course, Alexander Volkanovski was going to be back. And this is a big return fight for Alexander Volkanovski, wondering when he's going to be back. Now he's back. He's fighting Ilya Tapora in the main event of the evening, Saturday night, I should say, 10 Eastern, 7 in the West, 10 in the East. And, of course, I'm here to bring you all my coverage as far as this fight, why this fight is such a big deal for the UFC featherweight division. As well, the co-main event, very much looking forward to that as well. Robert Whittaker, he's back. He's fighting Paulo Costa in what is expected to be a barn burner of a fight with major implications in the 185-pound UFC middleweight division. Of course, welterweight contest between Jeff Neal and Ian Gary. That one has been in the making for quite some time. Ian Gary's got a lot of extracurricular headlines that are associated with his name right now. I'm going to dive into all that stuff. Ian Gary, Jeff Neal, and, of course, Merab Dvalishyan versus the former UFC flyweight champion and the former UFC men's bantamweight champion, Henry Cejudo, making his return after a very close title fight dating back a year ago against Aljamain Sterling. So it's been quite a bit since we've talked about Henry Cejudo on the podcast. So let's get right to it. Of course, got to pump up the fans. All right, so let's get right to it. Merab Dvalishyan versus Henry Cejudo. I just mentioned this one has major implications in the men's 135-pound division. Of course, Merab definitely deserving of a title shot at this point, but by his own doing, he has not gotten that shot. By his own doing, yes, Merab Dvalishyan could have easily had a UFC title fight in his career had it not been for the friendship that he has with Aljamain Sterling. And to me, if John Jones and Rashad Evans could fight one another, then friends, all that bull crap should be thrown out the window. Merab did himself a huge disservice by not fighting Aljamain Sterling when Sterling was the champ. The guy that did fight him because Merab would not was Henry Cejudo. And Henry is one of the greatest combat sports athletes of all time. He'll tell you that. I'll tell you that. Many people deny that fact, but anyone that wins 2 belts, 2 different weight classes, and has an Olympic gold medal to wrap around their neck at any time, that's definitely, a great, great resume. But with Henry Cejudo, the thing that's most interesting to me about Henry right now is coming off of this last fight against Aljamain Sterling. To be completely fair, I thought Henry won that fight. I didn't think Aljamain won it. I thought it was really close, but I thought Henry did get it done. One judge had Aljamain Sterling winning the fight. Essentially, Cejudo lost it by 1.1 round. In that 5th and final round, one judge had that 5th and final round for Sterling, while 2 had it for Cejudo. It was very weird scoring, as all 3 judges really didn't see eye to eye on any of the 5 rounds in their own, structure of how that fight was scored. To me, I thought Henry won the 5th round. Whoever won that 5th round was winning that fight. I had it tied 2 rounds to 2 rounds each, 2 rounds apiece, I should say, for either Cejudo or Aljamain. Cejudo, though, didn't get the decision, and that's what counts. Doesn't matter what the fans think. Doesn't matter what, Dana White thinks. It matters what the judges score in these bouts, and that's the situation of the sport. To me, though, Henry Cejudo should win this fight, but I think Merab is a very tough matchup. And realistically, Cejudo could have and probably shouldn't have retired originally. The whole reason that Aljamain Sterling and Petr Yan even went head-to-head was because Henry Cejudo retired. Had Henry not retired, I wonder what could have been. I wonder, would Henry have defended this title? Would Henry have retired already by now and not have to come back? Very curious, what if game that we're playing there. But this is a tough fight for both guys. This is a tough fight for Merab. It's an extremely tough fight for Henry. I think that Henry should get it done. I think he can get it done. So I'm going to just go with Cejudo in this one. Maybe I'm a little bit biased. Maybe my fanhood is getting in the way of this pick, but I think Henry Cejudo knows that he has to win this fight. Henry Cejudo doesn't win this fight, he's out of title contention. And at that point, what would be the purpose of Henry continuing to fight at that point? Could be the last fight of Henry's career with a loss. And if Merab wins, obviously he's next in line for a title shot. But I don't see Sean O'Malley fighting him. That's another story for another day. But I got Cejudo winning this fight. Jeff Neal versus Ian Gary. Neal versus Gary. This UFC welterweight matchup is one that I'm very excited for. There's been a lot of trash talk between these two guys over the last year and a half. And truthfully, I feel that Ian Gary has brought a lot of it on himself in terms of how he talked trash about Jeff Neal. Then some things came out of the woodwork in terms of Ian Gary that gave his opponents, the guys that want to fight him, a little bit of ammunition to go after him. And to me, Ian Gary kind of put it on himself. So Ian Gary was at one point an extremely likable figure in the UFC, and at this point, he's pretty unlikable. And I know a lot of people are rooting against him now that we're rooting for him. For a long time, that was the case, that Ian Gary was a fan favorite, a guy that was seen as a rising prospect, a rising star in the division, and now not so much. Now he's seen as a guy that people are rooting against, hoping that he won't win, hoping that he will not get to a UFC title fight. And count myself in as one of those guys. I like Ian Gary, but the superlatives, the extracurriculars, whatever you want to call it, the little extra stuff that comes with Ian Gary is just too much for me. I don't want that. I want a good, solid fighter that's great for the company, great for the sport. I don't know if that's Ian Gary, to be quite honest with you. And the trash talk that he put on Jeff Neal was far. He didn't think it was, meaning too far, I should say. And then everyone that's trash talked him, it's too far. So it's like if you can't handle it, don't dish it out. That's my take on that. So talking about the fight, though, I do think Ian Gary is going to get the W in this one. Jeff Neal is a very tough, durable fighter, but I just don't quite know if he can handle the elusiveness of an Ian Gary. The kickboxing game that was seen in Gary's performance against Neil Magny really showed me a lot, really showed me that Ian Gary is ready to tangle with some vets in this sport. And that says a lot. That's a graduation period that I thought was not to be seen yet. I thought there was still some meat left on the bone for him to get there. He's already done it against Neil Magny, who has won a lot of fights in the UFC men's welterweight division more than anybody. So for me, I'm going with Gary for this pick. Co-main event, Robert Whittaker versus Paulo Costa. This is a fight that features two big names inside the UFC middleweight division. One, a former champion. The other, a man that's fought for the UFC middleweight title, Paulo Costa. Robert Whittaker, the former UFC champ. Whittaker coming off of a loss to Dricus du Plessis. Paulo Costa, it's been a long time since Paulo Costa's been in there. He's suffered a lot of injuries over the course of his career. And he's also, dare I say it, he hasn't suffered many defeats, but it's almost as if the defeats that he has suffered have been, big moments in his career. Israel Adesanya, that fight really sent him back to the back of the line. But with a win over Luke Rockhold, which was his last fight in August of 2022, more than a year ago, that was a win that put him back in the win column, and he's coming off of a win. He's coming off of 3 canceled fights as well against Khamzat Chimaev, and now he's fighting Robert Whittaker. And I really think out of these 2 guys, I think they're both great. I think barring the Israel Adesanya era, both of these guys could have already fought each other for the UFC middleweight belt, with Whittaker being the champ, that is. So this is almost like a title fight without being a title fight. I don't know if this one is a 5-rounder. I don't think it is. Sometimes the UFC kind of mixes and matches which events. They have 5-round co-main events. I believe this one is a 3-rounder. Yes, so that's a difference in this fight. Robert Whittaker, Paulo Costa. I'm going to go with Whittaker in this one. I think he needs to get a W. That Dricus du Plessis fight was a big loss for him. I'm hoping that he can get back in there and get that W on Costa. But I'm going to go with Robert Whittaker in this one. And then the main event of the evening, Alexander Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria. This is a very interesting fight because you have a great champion in the UFC, one of the best champions that the company has to offer, in Alexander Volkanovski, coming off of a loss against Islam Makhachev, a knockout loss at that in the first round, who is now competing against a 27-year-old undefeated Hungary title challenger in Ilia Topuria, who says and makes no bones about it that he's going to knock out Alexander Volkanovski in the first round. So is this a fight where we see the title change hands? Is this a fight where we see the challenger rise to the occasion and shut down the champion? I'm not picking against Volkanovski. I didn't pick against Volkanovski in both Islam Makhachev fights. The second one came back to bite me. Dare I say it, the first one did, even though I felt like Volkanovski won that first fight. To me, I'm going with Volkanovski for this main event. He's going to keep that 145-pound title wrapped around his shoulder, wrapped around his waist. And I think the trash talk from Ilia Topuria, maybe he knows better than anybody that he can get it done, but I'm going to go with Volkanovski for this main event. All right, there you have it. My UFC 298 preview and prediction. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'm Ryan Thomas. Enjoy the fights on Saturday night.